I should have known something was wrong when I found the invitation tucked beneath my apartment door. Not addressed to me. Addressed to guest of Shawn Evans, as if I were a +1 to my own humiliation. The Hartwell Foundation Gala, Charleston's most exclusive charity event, the kind of night where old money wore new diamonds and everyone pretended the world outside didn't exist. I hadn't been invited. I'd been summoned. At 24, I'd learned that some messages came wrapped in silk and poison. This one came on cream cardstock with gold embossing and it smelled like a trap. But traps only work if you have something to lose, and Shawn Evans had already taken everything that mattered. Almost everything. The opal pendant my grandmother left me. The only thing connecting me to the woman who raised me, who told me stories about our bloodline that I'd dismissed as the ramblings of a dying mind, now hung around Cordelia Vance's throat. I'd seen it in the society pages 3 weeks ago. Cordelia, pharmaceutical heiress, draped in my grandmother's necklace at some charity luncheon, Shawn's hand possessive on her waist. He'd stolen it the night he left. Walked out of my life and took the only proof I'd ever belonged to anyone. Tonight I was taking it back. The Hartwell Manor dominated Charleston's historic district like a crown jewel set in Spanish moss and secrets. All white columns and wraparound porches, the kind of antebellum architecture that whispered of garden parties and gentility while burying darker histories beneath its manicured lawns. I'd driven past it 100 times on my way to double shifts at the veterinary clinic, never imagining I'd walk through its doors. Never imagining I'd crash through them, more like. My dress was secondhand, a deep green thing I'd found at a consignment shop in North Charleston, the kind of place where rich women dumped last season's mistakes. Fit well enough. The heels were scuffed, but in dim lighting no one would notice. I'd spent 45 minutes on my copper hair, pinning it up in a style I'd copied from a magazine, trying to look like I belonged somewhere I'd never been welcome. The doorman's eyes slid over me like I was furniture. Name: Jenna Forbes. I'm with the Evans party. A flicker of something, recognition maybe, or pity. He checked his list, found whatever lie Shawn had told to get me here, and stepped aside with a bow that felt more mocking than respectful. Your party is in the main ballroom, Miss Forbes. Your party. Not your date. Not your fiancé, though Shawn had never been that, not really. Just another man who'd seen something useful in me and discarded it when he was done. I followed the sound of a string quartet through corridors lined with portraits of Hartwell ancestors, their painted eyes tracking my movement like they knew I didn't belong. The gala attracted Charleston's most powerful families, old money and new influence, all gathered beneath crystal chandeliers to write checks and be seen writing them. 300 guests easily, all dressed in silk and diamonds that cost more than I'd make in a decade. The leather bag tucked under my arm, containing nothing but my phone and a prayer, suddenly felt impossibly naive. I spotted Shawn before he spotted me. Center of the room, prime positioning beneath the largest chandelier, laughing at something a silver-haired man had said. He wore a white suit with gold embroidery at the collar, the kind of thing that would look ridiculous on anyone without his particular brand of arrogance. His dark hair was slicked back. His smile was practiced. And beside him, her hand resting possessively on his arm, stood Cordelia Vance. Auburn hair swept into an elaborate updo. A gown of ice blue that probably cost more than my car. And around her throat, catching the chandelier light like captured moonlight, Grand's opal pendant. The sight of it stopped my heart. I'd watched my grandmother die in a hospital bed that smelled of antiseptic and endings. I'd held her hand as she whispered stories about our family, about keepers and covenants and things that walked in darkness. I'd dismissed it as morphine dreams, the confused ramblings of a woman slipping away. But she'd pressed that necklace into my palm with surprising strength and made me promise. Keep it close, Jenna. It's more than just jewelry. When the time comes, you'll understand. I'd worn it every day for 7 years. Until Shawn. Until he told me I was special, that I deserved better than double shifts and empty apartments, that he'd take care of me. Until he'd gotten what he wanted, my trust, my body, my grandmother's legacy, and walked away without looking back. Now I watched another woman wear my inheritance like a trophy, and something cold settled in my chest. I wasn't here to make a scene. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to take back what was mine and disappear before anyone remembered I existed. I started across the ballroom, keeping my head down, avoiding eye contact. If I could just get close enough to Cordelia, just find a moment when she was alone. Well. Shawn's voice cut through the string music like a blade. I looked up to find him staring directly at me, champagne flute frozen halfway to his lips, that familiar cruel smile spreading across his handsome face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, "it appears we have an uninvited guest." Every eye in the vicinity turned toward me, and I knew with the certainty of someone who'd spent her whole life being underestimated, that I had walked directly into a trap. Before we continue, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more wonderful stories to you, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's get back to the story. The ballroom fell silent in waves, conversations dying like candles snuffed by wind. 300 pairs of eyes turned toward me, and I felt each one like a needle pressing into skin. Shawn set down his champagne with deliberate care. "I asked you a question, Jenna. How did you get in here?" My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stand straighter. "You sent me an invitation." "Did I?" He looked around the room, playing to his audience with practiced ease. "I don't recall inviting anyone from the service entrance." Scattered laughter. Cordelia's was the loudest, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. Her fingers drifted up to touch the opal pendant at her throat, my grandmother's pendant, and the gesture was so casual, so possessive that something cracked inside my chest. "That necklace," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It belongs to me." Shawn's eyebrows rose in theatrical surprise. "Excuse me. The opal pendant. It was my grandmother's. You took it when you left, and I want it back." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I watched understanding dawn on the faces around me. Not sympathy, but the hungry anticipation of people who'd stumbled onto unexpected entertainment. This was better than the string quartet. Better than the champagne. Someone else's misery served fresh. "Oh, sweetheart." Shawn's voice dripped with condescension. "Is this what this is about? You crashed a charity gala because you're still obsessed with me." "I'm not." "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption." He raised his voice, addressing the room like a politician at a podium. "This is Jenna Forbes. We dated briefly last year. I tried to be kind, help her out, you know how it is, but some people don't understand boundaries. That's not." "She gave me that necklace as a gift." He shook his head sadly. "I should have seen the warning signs. The possessiveness. The delusions. I've been getting calls at all hours, letters you can imagine. Lies. Every word a lie, delivered with such smooth sincerity that I saw heads nodding around the room. Of course. A man like Shawn Evans wouldn't lie. A man with his family name, his connections, his tailored white suit and practiced charm. Why would anyone believe the girl in the second-hand dress? "You're lying," I said louder now. "You stole it. That necklace has been in my family for generations." "Security." Shawn's tone shifted from pitying to sharp. "Someone call security." Bodies in black suits materialized from the edges of the room. 2 of them. 3. Moving toward me with the efficient purpose of men who removed problems for a living. "Shawn, please." I hated the way my voice cracked. "Just give me back what's mine and I'll leave. I don't want anything else." Cordelia stepped forward, her ice blue gown swishing against the marble floor. Up close she was even more beautiful and more cruel. Her smile was a razor wrapped in silk. "Poor thing," she cooed. "It must be so hard watching from the outside. Seeing what you'll never have." She touched the opal again deliberately. "This does look better on me, don't you think? Some women are meant to wear heirlooms. Others are meant to serve hors d'oeuvres." The laughter was louder now. Less scattered. I saw phones raised, recording. Tomorrow this would be everywhere. The crazy ex-girlfriend who crashed the Hartwell Gala. Another joke. Another failure. Another Forbes who couldn't stay in her lane. Rough hands grabbed my arms from behind. The security guards didn't bother being gentle. I was clearly nobody worth gentle handling. My bag fell to the floor. My heel caught on the marble and I stumbled, dropping to one knee as my dress tore at the seam. Wait, please. They hauled me upright, started dragging me toward the exit. The crowd parted like I carried disease, faces blurring into a wall of judgment and amusement. I caught glimpses. A woman in diamonds whispering behind her hand, a man with silver hair shaking his head in disgust, Cordelia's satisfied smirk growing smaller as distance increased. Shawn followed a few steps, arms crossed, watching my removal with the expression of someone observing a minor inconvenience being tidied away. You know what your problem is, Jenna? His voice carried easily across the ballroom. You never understood your place. You thought dating me meant you belonged here. But some stains don't wash out. He paused, savoring the moment. Some people are just born to be forgotten. The words landed like physical blows. I felt them in my bones, in the hollow place where hope used to live. He was right, wasn't he? I'd spent my whole life trying to be enough. Enough for the foster families who sent me back. Enough for the grandmother who died before I could tell her I understood. Enough for a man who'd only ever seen me as a stepping stone. And I'd failed. Every time. The guards forced me to my knees again, preparing to lift me bodily toward the door. My dress was ruined. My dignity was shreds. Every eye in the room watched my destruction with varying degrees of satisfaction. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I lifted my chin, found Shawn's face through the blur of shame and fury, and I looked him dead in the eyes. I'm not nothing. I'm not forgotten. I am Jenna Forbes and I will not break for you. The lights went out. Every chandelier, every wall sconce, every candle in the 300-year-old ballroom died at once, plunging us into absolute darkness. Someone screamed. Glass shattered. The string quartet's music cut off mid-note. And in the void I felt something shift. Something ancient. Something coming. The darkness lasted 3 heartbeats. Long enough for panic to bloom. Long enough for the screaming to start. Then the doors exploded inward. Not opened. Not pushed. Exploded. Massive oak panels that had stood for 3 centuries ripped from their hinges like paper torn by invisible hands. Wind howled through the breach, cold and ancient, carrying the scent of magnolia blossoms and something older, something that made my blood run thick and slow. Chandeliers swayed violently overhead. Crystal pendants shattered against marble floors. The candles that had somehow survived the initial blackout guttered and died, leaving only the moonlight streaming through shattered windows to illuminate what came next. A figure stood in the doorway. Impossibly tall, or perhaps that was just the presence of him, the way he seemed to fill the space without moving. Pale skin that had never known Charleston's summer sun. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Renaissance paintings, all sharp angles and devastating beauty. He wore a white suit with burgundy accents at the collar and cuffs, not the pristine white of Shawn's designer fabric, but something older, something that looked like it had been tailored before the building existed. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart. The color of aged whiskey, burning with amber light that had nothing to do with the moon. Hungry. Fixed directly on me. The temperature in the ballroom plummeted. I could see my breath now curling white in the air. Frost crept across the windows, spreading in patterns that looked almost like words in a language I couldn't read. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, scattered throughout the crowd, people began to kneel. Not everyone, not at first. But here and there, men and women in evening wear dropped to one knee with expressions of absolute terror. The silver-haired man who'd been laughing with Shawn. A woman in crimson silk near the champagne fountain. A pair of twins by the string quartet's abandoned instruments. They knelt like subjects before a king, and their faces told me they hadn't chosen to. Their bodies had simply responded to something their minds couldn't override. The stranger began to walk. Each step echoed like thunder, though his movement was silent, fluid, predatory. The crowd parted without conscious thought, pressing back against walls and pillars as if proximity to him meant death. He passed the kneeling figures without acknowledgement. Past the trembling mortals without a glance. His whiskey-gold eyes never wavered from their target. Me. The security guards' hands tightened on my arms. I felt their terror through their grip, the fine tremor of men who had suddenly realized they were holding something they shouldn't. The stranger stopped 3 feet away. Up close, the cold radiating from him was physical. My torn dress offered no protection against it, but I couldn't feel the chill. I could only feel his gaze, moving over my face with an intensity that should have frightened me but instead felt like recognition. Like coming home to a place I'd never been. "Release her." His voice was quiet. Didn't need to be loud. It carried like thunder, rolling through the ballroom and settling into bones. The kind of voice that had commanded armies, ended kingdoms, shaped history while mortals slept. The security guards didn't just release me. They fled, abandoning any pretense of professional duty and sprinting for the shattered doors like men escaping a burning building. I stayed on my knees. Not because I couldn't stand, because I didn't trust my legs to hold me. The stranger studied me for a long moment. Then, without breaking eye contact, he turned toward Cordelia Vance. She stood frozen by Shawn's side, her ice blue gown suddenly inadequate against the supernatural cold. Her face had gone the color of old ivory. Her hands trembled at her sides. The stranger extended one finger, just one, and hooked it beneath the chain of my grandmother's opal pendant. "This," he said softly, "does not belong to you." Cordelia didn't move. Couldn't move. I watched her eyes widen with helpless terror as the necklace lifted from her throat, the clasp opening without resistance, the opal catching moonlight as it slid free of her possession. The stranger turned back to me. Knelt, bringing his impossible face level with mine. This close, I could see flecks of gold in his amber eyes, ancient and endless. He placed the necklace in my palm. Grand's opal, warm against my skin despite the cold radiating from him. I closed my fingers around it instinctively and something clicked into place. A rightness I couldn't explain, like a key finding its lock after years of searching. Then he removed a ring from his own hand. Silver, darkened with age, engraved with symbols that seemed to writhe and shift when I looked at them directly. A stone the color of blood sat at its center, pulsing with inner light. He took my left hand, slid the ring onto my finger. It was too large at first. Then it wasn't, the metal warming, tightening, conforming to my skin like it had been waiting for me. This woman. The stranger rose, turning to face the assembled crowd. His voice carried to every corner of the ballroom, inescapable and absolute. "Is under my protection. My claim. My intended." Gasps. Whispers. The sound of someone fainting. His gaze found Shawn still standing by the center table, white suit now drenched in cold sweat. Shawn had turned the color of curdled milk. "Touch what is mine again," the stranger said, each word a promise carved in ice. "And I will remind this city why they used to fear the dark." Shawn's mouth opened, closed. No sound emerged. The stranger, the vampire king, because what else could he be, what else had that kind of power, turned back to me and offered his arm with the courtly grace of another century. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Every rational thought demanded I refuse. But rationality had abandoned me the moment the doors exploded. An instinct told me something else entirely. Something that whispered in Grand's voice, in memories I'd dismissed as fever dreams. "When the time comes you'll understand." I took his arm. His skin was cool through the fabric of his suit but not cold. Thought. An anchor in a world that had stopped making sense. "Who are you?" I whispered as he guided me toward the ruined doors. Those amber eyes found mine again. "Gabriel Mikaelson." The name meant nothing to me. It clearly meant everything to the kneeling figures we passed, their heads bowed so low their foreheads nearly touched the marble. "And who am I to you?" A ghost of a smile touched his perfect lips. "That, Miss Forbes, is a very long story." We walked out of the Hartwell Gala together, leaving 300 witnesses to a moment none of them would ever forget. Behind us, I heard Cordelia beginning to sob. Heard Shawn demanding explanations no one could give. Ahead of us, the Charleston night waited, thick with jasmine and secrets. And on my finger, the Vampire King's ring pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. A black carriage waited at the end of Hartwell Manor's drive, though calling it a carriage felt inadequate. It was darkness given form. Lacquered wood that drank the moonlight, silver filigree worked into patterns that hurt to look at directly, wheels that made no sound against the gravel. The horses were worse. Midnight coats, eyes that reflected light like predators, utterly still in a way that living creatures never managed. When Gabriel handed me up into the velvet interior, I caught one of them watching me with an intelligence that had nothing to do with animals. We rode in silence through Charleston's historic district, past gas lamps and oak trees draped in Spanish moss. Then the city fell away, replaced by marshland and darkness, and I lost track of where we were going. The carriage stopped before ruins. An antebellum estate, or what remained of one. Columns crumbled to stumps, walls collapsed into ivy-choked rubble, the skeleton of a grand staircase leading nowhere. The kind of place ghost tours avoided because even tourists could feel something wrong in the air. Here. I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Gabriel's lips curved slightly. Appearances deceive, Miss Forbes. He led me through the ruins, past walls that shouldn't have still been standing, down a staircase hidden beneath collapsed timbers. The stairs spiraled deeper than made sense, carved from stone that predated the estate above by centuries. Then the passage opened into something impossible. A manor underground. Vast, sprawling, built from ancient stone and lit by torches that burned blue instead of orange. The ceiling disappeared into shadow high above. Corridors branched in every direction, and everywhere I looked there were vampires. Some wore modern clothes. Others dressed like they'd stepped from different centuries entirely. All of them stopped what they were doing to stare at me. The weight of their collective attention was suffocating. Curiosity mixed with suspicion, mixed with something that looked uncomfortably like hunger. The king returns. A woman's voice, cool and amused. She emerged from shadows near a carved archway, dark skin, silver hair cropped close to her skull, eyes the color of old coins. Her gown was the deep purple of bruises. With a mortal no less. How delightfully unprecedented. Duchess Lenore. Gabriel's tone carried warning. Miss Forbes is under my protection. So I see. The Duchess's gaze dropped to the ring on my finger, and something flickered across her face. Surprise quickly hidden. The king's signet. In 200 years you've never. That will be all, Lenore. She inclined her head, but her smile remained as we passed. I felt her eyes follow us until the corridor curved out of sight. Gabriel led me through the underground manor to a study lined with books older than America. He closed the door behind us, and the silence that followed felt almost physical. Ask, he said simply. Ask what? Ask why vampires are real. Ask why you kidnapped me from a gala. Ask what the hell is happening. My voice rose with each question. The shock was finally wearing off, replaced by something hotter. Start anywhere. I'm not picky. He moved to a sideboard and poured wine into crystal glasses. Red wine, I noted, and hoped it was actually wine. Vampires have existed alongside humanity for millennia. We are not your enemies, though we have been. A treaty governs our interaction with the mortal world. No open feeding. Strict secrecy. Consequences for those who break the covenant. I took the glass he offered. Didn't drink. A treaty. With who? With your bloodline, Miss Forbes. The Forbes women have served as keepers for over 800 years. Mortal witnesses who ensure both sides honor the agreement. Mediators when disputes arise. Conscience when power threatens to corrupt. The words hit me like cold water. By bloodline. Your grandmother, Rosemary Forbes, was the last recognized keeper. When she died, I was 17. My voice came out flat. I held her hand in the hospital while she talked about monsters and promises and things that walked in darkness. I thought it was the morphine. It wasn't. Gabriel's amber eyes held mine steadily. She was trying to tell you the truth. When she passed, the role should have transferred to you. But you vanished into the foster system and we... He paused. I failed to find you. The necklace seemed to burn in my palm. I looked down at it. Grand's opal, the only thing I'd had left of her until Shawn took even that. The necklace, I said slowly. It's not just an heirloom. It's the keeper's seal. It carries the accumulated power of every woman in your line who wore it before you. With it, you can see through vampire glamours, sense supernatural threats, invoke the treaty's protections. Gabriel stepped closer. Without a keeper, the treaty weakens. Factions who want war grow bolder. The peace your grandmother spent her life protecting is crumbling. I laughed. The sound was too sharp, too brittle. So let me understand. Vampires are real. My grandmother was some kind of supernatural diplomat. I'm supposed to take her place. And you, I gestured at him, at the ring on my finger, at everything. You claimed me in front of 300 people like I was property because you need a keeper? No. The word was quiet but firm. I claimed you because I was watching from shadow when that man tried to destroy you. I watched you refuse to cry. Refuse to beg. Refuse to be diminished even on your knees with your dignity in shreds. His jaw tightened. I acted on impulse, which I haven't done in 2 centuries. You can refuse. The ring can be removed. I'll return you to your life tonight if that's what you want. The offer hung between us. Thought about my life. Double shifts at the clinic. An empty apartment. No family, no connections, nothing but survival stretching endlessly forward. I thought about grand stories. The ones I'd dismissed, the ones that suddenly made terrible sense. I thought about the strange things I'd always seen from the corner of my eye. Shadows that moved wrong. Faces in crowds that flickered like bad reception. The feeling, constant as breathing, that something was missing. The ring pulsed warm against my finger. The opal pulsed in answer. I didn't remove either one. I have conditions, I said. Gabriel's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his amber eyes. Name them. You tell me everything. No secrets, no half-truths, no convenient omissions. If I'm going to do this, whatever this is, I do it with full information. Agreed. And I'm not your property. Claim or no claim, I make my own choices. I would expect nothing less. I looked down at Gran's necklace one more time. Thought I could almost hear her voice, whispering across years and death. When the time comes, you'll understand. I clasped the opal around my throat. The world shifted. The moment Gran's opal touched my skin, the world cracked open. Colors sharpened. Shadows deepened. The study around me remained the same, but I could see it differently now. Layers beneath layers, like looking at a painting and suddenly perceiving the brushstrokes. Gabriel's amber eyes burned brighter. The blue flame torches pulsed with a rhythm I could almost hear. And everywhere, just at the edge of perception, whispers of power moved like currents in deep water. It's overwhelming at first, Gabriel said quietly. The keeper's sight takes time to control. I gripped the edge of his desk until my knuckles went white. You could have warned me. Would you have believed me? Fair point. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of information and introductions. Gabriel assigned me quarters in the underground manor, rooms that had belonged to previous keepers, filled with journals and artifacts I couldn't yet understand. He gave me access to the archives, to history books that contradicted everything I'd learned in school, to records of treaties signed in blood and broken in war. And he introduced me to his court. Tobias Crane was first. Gabriel's second in command, a vampire who looked carved from mahogany, with eyes like chips of obsidian and a military bearing that suggested centuries of warfare. He regarded me with protective suspicion, as if I were simultaneously a valuable asset and a potential threat. The last keeper died on my watch, he told me bluntly during our first meeting. I don't intend to repeat that failure. I liked him immediately. Distrust I understood. It was the friendly ones who worried me. Isadora Vance arrived on my 3rd night, Cordelia's aunt, though the family resemblance ended at the auburn hair. Where Cordelia was sharp edges and cruelty, Isadora was ancient amusement, regarding me like a chess master studying an unexpected move. So you're Rosemary's granddaughter. Her smile revealed teeth that were just slightly too sharp. She was magnificent, you know. I do hope you inherited more than her jewelry. I inherited her stubbornness, I said, and her low tolerance for condescension. Isadora laughed, genuine surprised. Oh, I think I'm going to like you. But it was Lord Prescott who made my skin crawl. He appeared on my 5th day, sweeping into Gabriel's study with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere. Silver-white hair fell past his shoulders in an elegant wave. His face was ageless and handsome, his smile warm as summer sunshine. He took my hand and pressed it to his lips with old-world courtesy. "Miss Forbes, what a profound honor to meet the new keeper. Your grandmother was a dear friend. Her loss devastated us all." The words were perfect. The delivery was flawless. And the opal at my throat turned to ice. I saw it in flickers like a film stuttering through a broken projector. Blood on his hands, dark and old. Shadows writhing behind his smile. And something else. Something that made my stomach lurch. A face I recognized from photographs. Gran's face. Twisted in fear. I managed to smile. Managed to murmur appropriate responses. Managed to keep my composure until Prescott left with promises to welcome me properly to court. Then I found Tobias. Something's wrong with him. I grabbed Tobias's arm in the corridor, not caring about protocol. "Prescott. When I look at him I see." "Careful." Tobias's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He pulled me into an alcove, checking the shadows before speaking. "Prescott has ears everywhere. What exactly did you see?" I told him. "The blood. The shadows." Gran's face. Tobias's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his obsidian eyes. "The keeper's sight shows truth that others hide. If you're seeing those things, then they're real." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, there are records. Archives that Prescott doesn't know I've accessed. Come with me." We spent 3 nights in forgotten corners of the underground manor, pulling documents from hidden caches, piecing together a picture that made my blood run cold. Rosemary Forbes hadn't died of natural causes. The hospital records said heart attack. But the archives told a different story. A specific poison vampire made designed to mimic cardiac arrest. Untraceable to mortal medicine. Known to only a handful of ancients, including Lord Prescott. More damning still, records of my grandmother's final weeks. Visitors she'd received. Warnings she'd written in her personal journal, smuggled out before her death. She'd suspected someone was coming for her. She'd tried to hide me to scatter the bloodline so at least some of us might survive. "The treaties' enemies grow bold," she'd written. "He cannot be trusted. Something happens to me, find Jenna. Keep her hidden. Keep her safe." Prescott. I took the evidence to Gabriel at midnight, spreading documents across his desk with hands that shook with rage. "He killed her." My voice cracked. "That monster shook my hand and called her a dear friend, and he murdered her." Gabriel stood very still, staring at the papers. His amber eyes moved across dates and names and damning correlations. When he finally looked up, his expression told me everything. "You already knew." The words came out hollow. "You suspected." "Yes." No deflection. No excuses. "I've spent 17 years trying to prove it. 17 years of dead ends and disappeared witnesses and evidence that vanished before I could secure it. Prescott is old, Jenna. Older than me. He has allies in places I cannot reach. You failed to protect her." "Yes." "You failed to find me." "Yes." His voice was raw now, stripped of royal composure. "I failed Rosemary. I failed you. The guilt has been." He stopped. Started again. "I claimed you because you deserved to be claimed. Because I saw you refuse to break, and it was the most extraordinary thing I'd witnessed in 800 years. But I also claimed you because I couldn't fail another keeper. I couldn't let him win again." The honesty hurt. I wanted it to be simple. Wanted him to be either hero or villain, savior or user. But he was neither. He was just someone who'd tried and failed and kept trying anyway. Like me. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we have what I've never had before. A keeper who can see his true nature. Proof that won't disappear because the sight lives in you." Gabriel stepped closer. "But it will be dangerous. Prescott will learn you suspect him. He'll come for you like he came for Rosemary." I thought about Gran dying alone. Thought about 17 years of foster homes and empty apartments and the constant ache of not belonging. Thought about how tired I was of being alone. "Then we stop him first." Gabriel studied my face. You don't trust me. No. I met his amber eyes without flinching. But I'm choosing to believe you. There's a difference. For a moment, something cracked in his ancient composure. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude, or the ghost of something warmer. That, he said quietly, is more than I deserve. The ring on my finger pulsed. The opal at my throat answered. And somewhere in the manor above us, a monster waited. The blood moon rose over Charleston's swamps like a wound in the sky. I'd never seen anything like it. Crimson light spilling across cypress trees and black water, turning Spanish moss to dripping blood. The Mikaelson family chapel emerged from the mist like something from a fever dream, all crumbling stone and stained glass windows that glowed with colors no mortal artist had ever mixed. Vampire nobles from across the country had gathered for the accord. I felt them before I saw them, cold presences pressing against my keeper senses like fingers testing a bruise. They came from New Orleans and Savannah, from Boston and Seattle, from territories I hadn't known existed. Ancient powers drawn by tradition and curiosity, and I suspected, the rumor of a new keeper wearing the king's ring. Gabriel walked beside me through the chapel doors, his hand steady at the small of my back. He'd said little since we left the manor, but I could feel his tension. Centuries of control stretched thin by what was coming. Remember, he murmured as we entered, the keeper presides. Whatever happens, you speak first and last. The chapel's interior stole my breath. Candles burned in impossible configurations, defying gravity and logic. The assembled vampires formed a semicircle before an altar carved from a single block of obsidian, their faces pale moons in the crimson light. I recognized some from the manor. Tobias standing rigid near the entrance, Isadora watching from the shadows with her ancient amusement, Duchess Lenore studying me like a puzzle she hadn't solved. And Prescott. He stood near the altar, silver-white hair gleaming, politician's smile firmly in place. When our eyes met, his expression warmed with false welcome. The opal at my throat burned cold. My gown was the color of fresh blood, Gabriel's choice, and I understood why now. I was meant to be seen. Meant to be a symbol. The keeper restored, the treaty renewed, hope given form in silk and crimson. Or a target dressed for sacrifice. I took my place before the altar. The ring on my finger pulsed with Gabriel's power. The necklace blazed against my skin. For a moment, terror threatened to swallow me whole. Then I remembered Gran's face in my visions. Remembered 17 years of not knowing why she died. Remembered every foster home, every empty apartment, every moment of believing I wasn't worth fighting for. I opened my mouth and spoke the treaty's opening words. The ceremony unfolded in ritual phrases I'd memorized over sleepless nights. Each clan came forward to renew their oath, to honor the covenant, to protect the secret, to coexist with humanity rather than consume it. Ancient vampires knelt before a mortal woman and swore fealty to principles older than any of them. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was working. Then Prescott's turn came. He approached the altar with graceful steps, every movement calculated for effect. His loyalists shifted in the crowd. I'd learned to spot them over the past weeks. The vampires whose eyes followed him instead of Gabriel. I, Lord Prescott of the Southern Territories, he began, his voice rich with false sincerity, do hereby. He moved. Faster than thought, faster than instinct, a blade appearing in his hand that seemed to drink the candlelight. Not silver. Something older, something that made my keeper senses scream with recognition. The blade that killed Gran. Chaos erupted. Prescott's loyalists attacked the crowd. Gabriel's forces responded. Bodies blurred with supernatural speed, and the chapel became a battlefield of fong and fury. But Prescott wasn't aiming for the chaos. He was aiming for me. The blade arced toward my throat. I couldn't move fast enough. No mortal could. This was how Gran had died, caught by something she couldn't outrun, ended by a monster wearing a friend's face. Then the opal exploded with light. Power surged through me, raw and ancient, drawn from every Forbes woman who'd worn this necklace before me. My keeper abilities, fully awakened by the ceremony's magic, stripped away Prescott's glamour like paper torn from a gift. I saw him. Not the elegant lord. Not the warm smile. The monster beneath. Centuries of cruelty written in shadows that clung to his form, blood on his hands that would never wash clean, and there burned into his essence like a brand. Gran's face. Her final moments. Her murder playing out in excruciating detail. "I see you," I whispered. Then I screamed the treaty's oldest words. "By the keeper's right of revelation, let truth be shown." Light erupted from the opal, from the ring, from something deep in my blood that remembered what I'd never been taught. It washed over the chapel in a wave that couldn't be blocked or escaped. And every vampire present saw what I saw. They saw Prescott drive that blade into Rosemary Forbes's heart. Saw him watch her die. Saw him scatter her family, hunt her bloodline, spend 17 years ensuring no keeper would rise to challenge him. They saw his plans, humanity reduced to cattle, the treaty burned, vampire dominion unchallenged. They saw the monster. The chapel went silent. Then it erupted, not in battle but in judgment. Prescott's loyalists backed away from him, faces twisted with horror and betrayal. The ancient powers turned as one, centuries of alliance crumbling in the face of revealed truth. Prescott snarled, lunging for me one final time. Gabriel's stake caught him through the heart. The oldest vampire in the Southern Territories crumbled to ash at my feet. 800 years of existence ended in a heartbeat. The blade that killed my grandmother clattered to the stone floor, suddenly mundane, suddenly powerless. I stared at the pile of dust that had been my enemy. Waited to feel triumph. Felt only exhaustion and grief and something that might have been peace. "The keeper has spoken." Gabriel's voice rang through the chapel. "The treaty stands renewed. Let none question her authority again." One by one the assembled vampires knelt. Even Isadora. Even Lenore. Ancient powers bowing before a mortal woman who'd refused to break. I stood in my blood-red gown, my grandmother's necklace blazing at my throat, and finally let myself breathe. Later, hours later, after testimonies and formalities and the slow dispersal of vampire nobility, Gabriel found me on the chapel steps, watching the blood moon set over the swamps. "It's over," he said quietly. "Is it? Prescott is dead. His conspiracy is exposed. The treaty is stronger than it's been in decades." He paused. "You've earned your place, Jenna. No one will question you now." I looked down at the ring on my finger. His ring. The claim that had started everything. "You can remove it," Gabriel continued, and I heard the careful neutrality in his voice, the centuries-old king trying not to hope. "You've proven yourself. You don't need my protection anymore. You're free too. You keep offering to let me go." He went still. "I keep wanting you to know you have a choice." "I know." I turned to face him. This ancient creature who'd watched me refuse to break and decided that meant something. "I've always known. Since the first night when you gave me conditions and accepted everyone." The blood moon painted his pale features in shades of crimson and shadow. His amber eyes burned with something he was trying very hard to control. "I didn't survive all of this," I said slowly, "just to go back to being alone. I spent 17 years believing I wasn't worth fighting for. Believing some people were born to be forgotten." I stepped closer. "You showed me that was a lie. Not because of prophecy. Not because of bloodlines. Because you saw me at my worst and decided I was worth claiming anyway. Jenna. If you're offering me a choice, Gabriel, then I choose this." I lifted my hand, showed him the ring that had never felt like a chain. "I choose you." For a long moment he didn't move. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew something small. A second ring, simpler than the first. No ancient silver. No shifting symbols. Just a band of white gold with a single stone the color of dawn. "Then I choose you," he said, his voice rough with 800 years of loneliness finally ending. "Not because of prophecy. Not because of guilt. Because you stood when they tried to break you, and I have never seen anything so magnificent in all my years." He slid the ring onto my finger beside the first. I pulled him down and kissed him as the blood moon finally set, and somewhere in the swamps the first birds began to sing. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed Jenna and Gabriel's story, don't forget to click that subscribe button, like the video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more wonderful stories like this one to you. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next.